It all began with sharp, violent sound, the shattering of porcelain on the kitchen floor. The noise echoed for a fraction of a second before being swallowed by a deep, unsettling silence. In the small apartment above a shuttered bookstore in East Boston, 7-year-old Lily Alves stood frozen in the doorway. Her mother, Clara, was sprawled on the floor, motionless. One arm was outstretched, her fingers inches from the shards of a chamomile teacup. Steam still rose from the broken mug, an ethereal ghost in the dim afternoon light. Clara's head had struck the cabinet on the way down. Blood now traced a thin, dark line behind her ear, staining her dark hair. Lily's stuffed rabbit fell from her limp hand to the floor. She took a step forward on trembling legs. "Mama?" The name was a whisper, almost inaudible. No answer. Panic rose her throat like an icy tide, but she didn't scream. The tears didn't come. Instead, her mother's instruction, repeated like a mantra for any emergency, took over. "Call Uncle Ben." She climbed onto the counter, the cold of the granite seeping into her bare feet. Grabbing her mother's phone, her cold, clumsy fingers slid across the screen. The contact list appeared. Uncle Ben. Her finger trembled, pressing the name just above it, a number she had never seen before. The call connected. A man's voice, calm and deep, came through. Lily hesitated, confusion wrestling with fear. "I'm sorry. Is this Ben?" she stammered, and then the dam broke. "No, I need help. My mom fell. She's bleeding. She's not waking up. Please come." There was a moment of static, then silence. Miles away, Julian Croft stood in the dark, barefoot on the polished concrete of his penthouse. The phone was still to his ear. Behind him, through a wall of glass, the city glittered, indifferent and vast. The child's voice was a thin thread of desperation in his silent, ordered world. "Where are you?" he asked, his voice firm, cutting through her hesitation. I don't know the street." The little voice trembled. "But we live over Jimmy's bookstore. There's a blue door, apartment 3B. It was enough. Julian asked no more questions. He didn't call his assistant, didn't dial for an ambulance. A primal intuition, a compulsion he hadn't felt in years, took over. He threw a heavy coat over his dress shirt, grabbed his keys from a marble tray, and left without a second word. 13 minutes later, his black sedan tore down a frozen backstreet and screeched to a halt. The building was what the city called historic, which really meant neglected. A blue door, barely hanging on its hinges, stood at the top of 3 concrete steps crusted with old ice. He took them 2 at a time. The hallway smelled of dust and the steam from old radiators. The door to apartment 3B was ajar. Julian knocked once. The door creaked wider. A small girl stood in the narrow gap, her socks soaked, clutching her mother's phone as if it were a shield. "You came," she said, her voice full of awe. "I did." He entered without asking. The apartment was neat, but worn. A pile of clean laundry in the corner. Soup still warming on the stove, a calendar on the fridge with 3 dates circled in red. He knelt beside Clara. Her breathing was shallow, her face pale. He checked her pulse, pressed gently on her ribs. Concussion, maybe more. She needed help now. He scooped her up in his arms without hesitation. She was light, too light for someone who probably skipped meals, so her daughter wouldn't have to. "Coat," he said gently to Lily. She grabbed her jacket and followed him. The SUV roared back to life. He blasted the heat as Lily climbed into the back beside her mother. Julian drove with one hand, already calculating the nearest emergency entrance with the shortest wait time. At the second red light, Lily spoke. "You're not Uncle Ben." "No." "Are you a doctor?" "No." She thought about that, then said softly, "But you came anyway." Julian didn't answer. He glanced in the mirror. She was watching him, not with fear, but with something else. Hope. He turned back to the road. "She's going to be okay." "You promise?" "I do." He didn't know why he said it, but in that moment, it was the only thing that felt true. At the ER entrance, Julian didn't wait for a nurse. He carried Clara straight inside, past the check-in desk, past the protest of a night clerk, and directly to the trauma bay. I'm not leaving her in the hallway, he said simply. They didn't argue again. While doctors worked to stabilize Clara, Julian sat in the waiting area with Lily. She curled up on the bench beside him, her jacket still zipped up to her chin. He handed her a warm bottle of water. She held it without drinking. Is she your mom? He asked. She nodded. She works a lot. Julian glanced at the vending machine, then back to Lily. Are you hungry? She shook her head. She wanted to stay right here. Half an hour later, a nurse came out. Clara was stable. Concussion, dehydration, exhaustion, no internal bleeding. She'll wake up soon, the nurse said. You can go see her. Lily looked at Julian. Will you come too? He paused, then nodded. Clara blinked, her throat dry, her body stiff as if she'd been asleep too long in the wrong position. A dull pain bloomed in her left temple. She turned her head, wincing, and saw a man sitting quietly in the corner of the hospital room. Not a doctor, not anyone she recognized. She sat up too fast. The 4 in her hand tugged. The man stood. His voice was low but calm. Careful. You lost a lot of blood. Clara stared at him. Who are you? There was a long pause before he replied. I got a phone call from your daughter. She said you fell. I was the one who brought you here. Her lips parted. Wait, Lily had called. The memory hit her like a jolt. The kitchen floor, her knees buckling, the cold tiles, then blackness. She closed her eyes. God, I must have told her call Ben. He lives 2 floors down. She must have dialed the wrong number. He nodded once. She was scared, but she did exactly what she had to do. Clara opened her mouth, then closed it again. She looked down at the 4 line, her breathing still shaky. Then she said it quietly but clearly. Thank you for coming, for helping her, for helping me. The man didn't nod or smile, but something shifted in his posture, a slight loosening of his shoulders, as if a weight had been acknowledged. She said you were bleeding. He said, I didn't think twice. I just drove. She looked up at him. You didn't call an ambulance. I didn't have time to wait. I was closer than they would have been. A pause. And I know what it's like to wish someone would show up, and no one ever does. Clara didn't ask what he meant. The way he said it, flat, precise, with nothing ornamental, told her it wasn't something he said often. A soft knock on the door broke the moment. Lily peeked in, holding a small stuffed bear under her arm. When she saw her mother sitting upright, she ran in, arms flung wide. Mama, Clara pulled her into a hug. Hey, baby, I'm okay. I'm okay now. Lily looked at Julian, then back at her mom. He came fast, just like in the movies. His car was shiny and loud. Clara managed to laugh. She looked up at the man. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. Julian, he said simply. Julian Croft. The name made her blink. She had heard it before somewhere, but before she could place it, a nurse stepped in, clipboard in hand. Ms. Alves, your vitals look good. We can discharge you within the hour, but we'll need someone to sign the papers. Clara turned to Julian, surprised. You didn't have to stay. I know, he replied, but I did. Then he reached into his coat, pulled out a folded paper. Discharge is done and your bill is covered. Clara froze. What? I signed as a responsible party. It's done. I can't. You don't have to. Just take your daughter home. Lily tilted her head. Is he your friend now, Mama? Clara looked at the man in the coat, the calm face that had seen her at her most vulnerable, and said nothing judgmental, just acted. Then she looked at Lily and said softly, he might be. As the nurse helped her out of bed, Clara turned once more to Julian. Thank you, not just for tonight, for staying. He nodded once, then turned to leave without another word. But just before he stepped out the door, he paused. Clara, right? The hospital you used to work for, St. Jude's. She blinked. Yes. Why? No reason, he said. Just sounded familiar. And then he was gone. The next morning, a knock on the door startled her. It was Julian. No coat this time, just a sweater under a blazer and a paper bag in his hand. I brought some basic supplies, he said. Antiseptics, gauze. Clara blinked. caught off guard by his presence. "You didn't have to." "I didn't do it for a thanks," he said simply. "May I come in?" He placed the bag on the counter and took a slow look around the small apartment. His eyes paused briefly on the kitchen floor, then returned to hers. "I meant what I said. Your daughter did something most adults wouldn't do in that moment." Clara leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "She's strong. Has to be." A beat of silence passed. Then Julian spoke again, his voice quieter this time. "St. Jude's, that was your last job, right?" She nodded. "I was head nurse on the oncology floor for 8 years. "You left voluntarily?" "No," she said, her jaw tightening. "I filed a formal complaint after a patient died, an equipment error no one wanted to admit to. The finance board said it was an isolated issue. They shut me out before I could push further." Julian's eyes narrowed slightly. "Do you remember the nature of the malfunction?" Her breath caught. "A cardiac monitor failed during a chemo-related complication. The alert never sounded. We caught it too late." He said nothing for a moment, then asked, "You still have documentation?" Clara studied him. "Why do you care?" "Because that hospital receives funding from a foundation I once sat on," he replied. "And the name St. Jude's has come up in more than one irregularity report over the past 2 years. I never looked into it until now." There was a shift in her face, something between disbelief and recognition. Julian continued calmly but clearly, "If there's anything you kept, anything official, I'd like to see it. Off the record." She hesitated, then turned, walked to a side drawer near the fridge, and pulled out a brown envelope taped shut and labeled in her handwriting. "Leo, report 928. She handed it to him. "I was going to submit it to the state medical board," she said, "but by then I was already being pushed out. HR accused me of falsifying records. It never made it past legal review." Julian took the envelope and opened it carefully. Inside were incident logs, screenshots of internal emails, and one printout circled in red, a delivery receipt for defective monitors signed by the hospital CFO. He read the name, then looked up. "The signature? You saw it personally?" "No," she said, "but the CFO signed off the supply orders for our floor. I assumed he'd have known." Julian folded the file closed. "I know that name," he said. "He worked on 2 of my early wellness centers. Both went over budget. Both shut down in under a year." He didn't explain more. He didn't have to. Then gently, he handed the file back. "Do you trust me enough to keep this for now?" Clara's gaze was firm. "I don't trust easily, but I trust facts. If you can do something with it quietly, then keep it." That night, Julian didn't go home. He sat in his office overlooking the frozen river. The file Clara had handed him lay open across his desk. At 2 a.m., he made a call to a private line. "Jonas," he said as soon as it connected, "I need a complete audit of the Westwood Medical Fund. Full grant history, including subcontractors, tonight." A beep flashed on his screen. "Internal investigation. CFO Westwood Health Initiative." He clicked it open. The name stared back at him. Andrew Cowan. That name had surfaced once before. Another message came through. Unusual payouts flagged February 2021. $480,000 redirected to subsidiary registered under Medcare Integrated Holdings, LLC. Julian clicked on the corporate profile. Silent partner listed as A. Cowan. This wasn't just negligence. This was systemic, deliberate. He picked up the phone again. This time, he didn't call a lawyer. He called her. "It's me," Julian said, his voice low but steady. "I know it's late. I wouldn't have called unless it was important. I need you to tell me exactly what happened the night of the monitor failure. Not the report, not the file, the real thing." Silence. Then her voice came, raw. "There was a boy, Leo, 7 years old, leukemia. His counts were low and the chemo had been hard on his heart. I told them we needed round-the-clock telemetry. The telemetry unit they gave us, Unit 4C, had already flagged malfunctions a week before. I reported it. Nothing changed. He went into cardiac distress just after 2 a.m. The alert never sounded. We found him when his mother ran out into the hallway screaming. Julian felt something in his chest tighten. "This wasn't about money for you," he said. "No," she replied. "It was about that mother, about the look on her face when I told her there was nothing else we could do. That face has never left me." "Thank you," Julian said. "I believe you. I'll do the rest." The boardroom on the 47th floor of Lucent Corp had never seen Julian Croft in silence for this long. He stared at the beige folder lying between him and Charles Whitmore, a seasoned board member. "These aren't public records," Charles said quietly. "No," Julian replied. "What does she want?" "Nothing," Julian said. "That's why I'm here." "If half of this is true," Charles finally said, "we're talking about criminal concealment. The CFO signed these. I want the truth to be acknowledged internally. I want that man removed and the records audited. No fanfare, no press conference. Justice. Quietly. You want to protect the nurse," Charles said. "I want to protect what's left of decency in the system," Julian replied. "She spoke up once and lost everything. I won't let that happen again." That night, the knock came just after 9. Clara opened the door to find Julian standing there. In the kitchen, she poured 2 cups of tea. "You found something, didn't you?" Julian nodded, placing a folder on the table. "Clara," he said, his voice low, "I want you to come back with me, not to St. Jude's, not as a nurse. I want you as a temporary independent advisor. You're the only one who knows the inside of that system and isn't tainted by it." Clara's hands gripped the edge of the table. "No, I haven't even explained." "I don't need you to," she cut him off. "I lived it. You think I don't want justice? I do, but I also want to protect what's left of me." Silence spread between them. "I wouldn't ask if I didn't believe you were the only one who could hold the truth together," Julian said softly. "That's not fair," she whispered. "You wanted to walk back into the place that broke me?" It was Lily's voice that broke the silence. From a hallway, small and unsure. "Mom." Lily stepped forward, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "If you help them, will the bad people stop hurting others?" Clara's breath caught in her chest. She looked at her daughter, the reason she'd stayed quiet all these years. Then she looked at Julian. Waiting, she closed her eyes and exhaled. "All right, I'll do it, but I have one condition. I do it for the patients who never got a second chance. And when this is over, I walk away." Julian nodded. "That's all I hope for." Later that night, in his car, Julian called Jonas. "She's in." "Then I hope she's ready," Jonas said, "because what I just pulled from Medker's old shell accounts links him back to a second facility. Guess who signed off on the transfer approval? Andrew Cowan. We're not just looking at embezzlement. We're looking at patient neglect for profit." The sun had barely risen when Jonas stepped into the private office on the 12th floor. "It's the break we needed." Inside, stapled between pages of ledger exports, was a scanned PDF, a transfer authorization from St. Jude Hospital. Signed, Clara Alves, stamped approved by CFO Andrew Cowan. "She told me she never touched anything like this," Julian said. "She didn't," Jonas said. "I had her signature from an old HR file. It was forged." A long pause filled the room. "We send it now, today," Julian said. He laid the document on the kitchen table. Clara read it slowly. She only blinked once when she saw her own name forged in tight, unnatural loops. "I didn't sign this." "I know," Julian replied. "I should have known they'd use your name. You were already discredited. No one would question it." "That was the point," she said. "Use someone broken. No one listens to the ones who've already fallen." She turned to him. "Then let me be the one to send it." He nodded once. "I'll be right here." She clicked send. 41 hours later, Andrew Cowan was suspended indefinitely. A week later, Clara stood by the window of Julian's office, arms crossed. The internal investigation moved quickly. "Are the machines still being used?" she asked. Julian shook his head. "They were pulled 2 days ago. Every single unit flagged." "Then I'm done." "I understand," he said, but he didn't stop there. "I want you to stay on as an independent auditor. Flexible schedule, full benefits, triple what you made before." She didn't even hesitate. No. Julian raised an eyebrow. It's not charity. It's what you're worth. She looked up at him then, her gaze steady and sharp. Exactly. That's why I get to choose what peace looks like for me. That Thursday late, rain tapped softly against the pavement. Julian stood outside the same old apartment building, a single bag of takeout in one hand. The light was on. He didn't knock immediately. Then, the door creaked open. Lily stood there, grinning. "You're late," she whispered. "I know," Julian said, stepping inside. In the small kitchen, Clara stood barefoot, stirring something on the stove. She turned, saw him. Their eyes met. Silence. The kind that meant something had shifted. Julian spoke first. "I didn't come to change your life." Clara nodded once. "I came because I think I need mine to be changed," he added quietly. Her breath hitched. "I don't know what this is," he added. "But if you're still willing, I'd like to stay a little longer this time." She didn't rush to reply. Instead, she reached into the drawer, pulled out a second spoon and handed it to him. "Then stir this. Don't let it burn." He laughed, surprised by the simplicity of it. No grand declarations, no neat endings, just a beginning. Lily giggled from the table. Julian stirred the pot, standing beside Clara, the scent of garlic and thyme rising between them. In that moment, Julian understood what he had never been able to buy, build, or control. Belonging, not as a savior, not as a CEO, just someone invited to stay. And in a modest apartment with rain softening against the glass, a man who once had everything finally had something real. A place at the table, a place to begin again, and two people willing to begin with him.